It's been
Oh,
10 months, right, without AHL hockey to be back on the ice this weekend with training camp, to be with the guys again. How grateful are you for this opportunity? And how close do you think we came to not having AHL hockey?
very, very grateful. I found myself with such a long layoff, even a little bit nervous, forgetting how some of this stuff works with training camp and that. But yeah, it has been every day as we got a little bit closer, we weren't sure. There was times through this that it didn't look promising at all, and then there was some optimism, and then you would find yourself in an internal battle with, do I get too excited that this is going to start? And then I'm let down. So it's been a roller coaster going into it, and just real thankful that we're able to come to the rink and experience hockey and be able to get back on the ice.
Thank you, Ali. Next up, we'll go to Kyle Mace from Chocolate Hockey. Go ahead, Kyle.
Carbs, thanks for doing this. First question I'll ask you here is probably one of the toughest parts of your job this year, which is going to be juggling this roster, knowing that you also have to deal with a taxi squad of guys that possibly could have been with you this year, and just all the movement this year that's going to happen. What's your mindset right now of looking at the roster that you have and knowing how easily stuff could be changing if there is a reason that you just start to lose guys because of, now you're not just dealing with injuries, but you're dealing with guys that possibly could get COVID up there, and then your roster gets shortened down here?
Yeah, it's a day by day thing, Kyle. It's new to everybody, and I think exactly what you said, that there's going to be movement. There's going to be uncertainty with what things look like tomorrow, let alone the weekend. And I think you'll see, because it's a balancing act for a lot of NHL teams, of trying to get players ready to play games, but also having them on hand ready if players are to go down, if there's any type of outbreak on the NHL team, let alone the American League team. So yeah, I think you'll see a lot of unique situations. I think, like, let me give you an example. There may be scenarios where a player hasn't played in a while on the taxi squad in Washington. He comes down and plays games in Hershey for the weekend, goes back up. There's a lot of moving parts. When the NHL team goes on the road, they need the taxi squad to go with them on the road. So do they take more? There's some juggling, and it's going to be a day-by-day thing, absolutely.
Thank you, Kyle. Next up, we'll go to Pat Principe from WGAL. Pat, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hey there, Carl. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. I'm glad to see you got a fresh haircut for this media op. Way to go. I'm curious, given the fact that you guys had such a long layoff, I mean, the season was called back in mid-March, and now here we are virtually 10 months later, starting up again. What are the challenges in camp that you're facing now, having that kind of a layoff and getting these guys ready to play a season now that's really going to be a sprint more than a marathon, right?
Absolutely. So the two main things that I think our staff, we looked into, number one being injury prevention, because you got to be delicate with this as players. Some have been up in Washington and skating, and some guys are coming in having their first day. Some are coming off 7-day, 10-day, 14-day quarantines and hopping on the ice. So normally where training camp in your first few days and it's been difficult, but we're trying to manage and make sure that we're keeping tabs on how players are physically, so that we're at that line, but not going over the line to put them in a injury spot to where groins and hip flexors and that stuff. So that's number one. And then I think the second thing with being on the layoff is just the game ready compete. The game ready compete. There's summer hockey, there's skills sessions, there's a lot of training that these guys have been going through for 8-9 months, some of them, but there's a whole different level of game. And that's where you need to really get your mind and your physical readiness. You need to wrap your head around that. And that's what we're trying to get our guys understanding there's some game habits where you're stopping on pucks, you're really heavy on your stick, you're going to the net hard, where sometimes in practice and in skill sessions in the summer, that's not really the case. So I think those are the two main things that we've been focused on.
Thank you very much, Pat. Next, we'll go to Nathan from CBS 21. You can go ahead and unmute yourself, Nate.
Hey, Carbs, how are you?
Hey, Nate, good to see you.
Hey. With the new conference this year, only playing games where you guys can travel back and forth to, how is that going to change your approach going into games? I mean, you're going to see teams a lot more often than you did, especially the Penguins and the Phantoms and stuff like that.
Yeah, we've talked about that. We have absolutely talked about that when you're going to play a team 12 times and in a unique scenario. I think what you're going to see and what we're going to challenge ourselves as coaches is to find advantages through X's and O's, where normally in normal years, the American League is such a grueling schedule of Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Lehigh, Wilkes, and then another team. And even though it is quite regional heavy, you're still usually turning the page and playing a different team. So it's a whole different, well, now with only 3 teams, we're going to know exactly what we're going to expect from Binghamton, Newark, Wilkes-Barre, Lehigh Valley. So you'll find, I think there's ways for us as coaches to help put our players in a good position to have success through systems and through breaking down how can we beat Wilkes or how can we take advantage of something that they do, and vice versa. We're going to have to be real adaptable and be willing to look for different edges when you play a team this consistently or play 3 teams this consistently.
Thank you very much for your question. We'll go to Andrew Callista from Fox 43. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hey, Coach, thanks a lot for taking the time. Really appreciate it. You're a pretty emotional guy. The last 2 years, you talked about how hard it was to deliver speeches, when the season ended, your first year with the run and then last year with the abrupt stoppage. I'm just wondering, what were the emotions like when you first got the team together and your season opening speech? What was the very first thing that you said to the team as a whole?
So when it was different because we ended in such a awkward fashion. We weren't around one another. So to end the season, it was sort of wait, hopefully we get back to playing, and it wasn't. And so that was done, remotely through a message to the entire group. But this year, what I said to them at the end was, I gave them a number, which I've been thinking about a lot of, the number 316. And I'll ask, does anybody know what that number signifies? 316.
Days without hockey.
Hey, that's exactly the day that we, the last time we touched the ice at the Giant Center was 316 days ago when we were preparing for the Toronto Marlies on Thursday, about to play them on Friday. And when you see that number in big, bold letters, that's a long time, almost a full calendar year. So I put that number just to kind of make that real, and that's how long that we've been off. And then underneath it, 100. And the number 100 signifies essentially, depending on what happens with playoffs, but we have 100 days to take advantage of. And so when you contrast those two things, 316 and 100 days together, I just wanted to make it clear, even though this is very unique, even though it's not ideal in a lot of different ways, let's take advantage of 100 days where we can get better and closer to our individual goals. We can enjoy our time together. We can work and compete and improve as a team. We can win games, all this stuff. We've got 100 days to, why just let it go by the wayside when we've been off for so long? And we only have 100 days. So let's take advantage of it, essentially.
Thank you for your question. We'll go 3 more questions with Carbs, and then we'll have a couple players coming in. We'll go back to Ali Barubi from ABC 27. Ali, you can unmute yourself.
I'm convinced the 2020 Hershey Bears would have been Calder Cup champions, so you should just hang the banner at this point. But I think about that, right? Like, there are players on this team who that's their last memory is feeling so good about a playoff run, their chances at getting a cup, that's cut short. Now you mentioned 100 days. You have to have short-term memory this season, right? Like you can't let a loss turn into 4 because that's, a significant portion of your season. How important is it with a young team, with young guys, to have a short-term memory this year?
It will be. And I don't think anybody will ever forget the year that we had last year. And that'll always, in a positive way, in a way that we'll look back. Yeah, absolutely. The what if, there's no question that the players and the staff will always think what if, but when I look back and look at the strides that group took, the individual development from our players, it's a lot of positive. So I think last year, I think they'll all never forget it, but I doubt, shouldn't say that. I think this group knows what we're capable of doing, and there's some new faces and some players that were here last year. So I think it's still that motivating. Okay, Friday night we're going to go out and to play to the level that we know we're capable of playing to, and not as much reflection. But to your point of this year and not letting losses accumulate, absolutely, our mindset won't change. Our standard of the way that we do things and how we're going to play the game and how we're going to practice and how we're going to prepare will not change this year, given the circumstances. I just don't believe in it. We're going to approach games the same way. Yes, will things be different? Yes, will we play the same opponent a lot more? No question. But our daily preparation and how we do things here and our standard won't change.
Thank you, Ali. We'll go 2 more questions back to Kyle Mace with Chocolate Hockey. Go ahead, unmute yourself, Kyle.
Thanks, Fish. So it's kind of a weird year going into a season not knowing the playoff structure. What can you talk about what you know? I don't know how much you can talk about of what you know, but what do you know about a playoff structure this year? And how does that change the expectations and motivations knowing, because we don't know how many teams might be playing, how many not. You don't know how many points you might need, I think, at this point. So what's that mindset right now, not knowing, do we need to, be the top of the division to even make the playoffs, or where does that balance fit in?
It's tough because when my mind goes there, I get frustrated and disappointed. And I think that's the players probably are feeling the same way. From every indication that I've heard, a Calder Cup will not be handed out this year. So when that, anything short of that, I think leaves you in a state where you go, darn, that really, really, really stinks. But it's got to be just in the moment. And there's a lot of other things. If you're stuck on that point, you're gonna struggle for 100 days, and you're not gonna get any better, and you're not gonna have success. So that's what I'm just trying to focus on. That's what I'm trying to help our guys and our staff, is trying to stay as short term as we can. What do the playoffs look like? How many teams will make it? What's the format? I honestly don't know. I hope there's some level of it. I even hope they change their mind and maybe there's a way to play for the Calder Cup. I've heard that that's not possible. But I've learned never say never, hopefully. And we'll just continue to do what we do, and that stuff will sort itself out.
To follow up really quickly on that. So what motivation then there in your mind, how are you keeping the guys motivated there, knowing that, okay, we won't have a championship to play for? What are you putting in front of them to keep them motivated?
Great call. Okay. So think about this. If you're a young player that's trying to make the Washington Capitals, you have a ton to play for and work for every single day. If you're maybe a veteran player that's on the last year of a very nice NHL contract, 2-way, you have a lot to play for, hopefully in this organization and maybe in the other 31 organizations. Anybody that, whether you're looking to potentially go to Europe, if you're all these things, and I'm not afraid of the individual parts. Some coaches don't like talking about the individual component of this game. I'm not afraid of that. I think it's a great motivation. If everybody has selfish instincts that they want to achieve things individually. And I embrace that. Of course, everybody does. So as long as you're doing it in a productive way inside of our team setting, I'm all for that. And I think that's where the motivation for guys comes to is if we're winning hockey games, if you're doing the right things, if you're coachable and playing the way that we're asking you to as coaches, you're going to get more opportunity, you're going to look good, and you're going to make more money, and you're going to earn a better contract, or you're going to play for the Washington Capitals. And that's as simple as it gets when it comes to motivation. And if you can't get up for that, if you can't get fired up in the morning to show up to the rink and be enthusiastic to get better, well then, I mean, I'm going to bet that those positive things aren't going to happen for you, or it's going to be more difficult for that stuff to happen.